Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic deep dive and having a good time while doing it. Usually joined by the usual suspects. I mean, do I call you guys regular viewers? Is that the term? What I know is that when I get on every week, it definitely is a boost and surge in energy when I have you guys asking questions and participating like you guys always do. Before we get too much into today's talk, I want to start with just the housekeeping. If you guys are not getting my emails, you know the deal. You can go to masterchimletter.com, and there you'll be able to opt into my email newsletter. It's free. I send it every day, and I'm usually getting a little bit more transparent, a little bit more direct and open with my messaging on the emails than what the social media platforms are ever going to allow me to do. So go to masterchimletter.com and sign up for that if you're not getting it. Other links are in the description, depending on whether you're watching on YouTube or one of my Facebook pages. So who do we got here? Jesse, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. Yarn Saxa, good to see you, darling. Tuan Tom is in the house. All right. Good to see you, brother man. Hope all is well. Here last week, too. Always appreciate you hanging out. Jamie, my man up in Canada, and his lovely lady. Aaron, good to see you. Hope the baby's doing well. All right. So as you guys are jumping on, always feel free to chime in with a hello, with a question, a comment, whatever. I got to be honest, about 10 years ago, and it was 10 years ago, 2014, that I first started my public, my public quest to go outside the jiu-jitsu world. I've owned a martial arts school for 20 years and started talking about the things I like talking about outside the application of martial arts. And when I started the Pressure Project, which is my first podcast, there was a lot of pushback, a lot of hate, a lot of I've gotten death threats. I've had dockets ready on people that were just consistently threatening me and my family and stuff. And it got serious at a couple of points back then. But I don't know if this is the best segue into the point I'm going to make, but nowadays, I seem to be with a pretty vetted group. I seem to be with a group of people that follow me because they have some significant form of overlap with the things that I'm talking about. I would say that there is something to be said for the pushback that every once in a while I used to get. I've been coaching, men for over 20 years in the martial arts, one-on-one. I was a personal trainer before I even took martial arts. For over the last decade, more, mindset, business coaching. I call it the pressure process for a reason, my one-on-one coaching program. But the point is, at this point, I've had thousands of hours of one-on-one time with men navigating the obstacles of the terrain of their lives. There is a perspective that one gains with that much time invested in helping men specifically in their lives that empowers my level of confidence with many of the things that I speak about. I would say that now more than ever, with social media being the way it is, and this forum, this medium is certainly not exempt from this. We do wind up falling into the echo chambers of social media. And I'm going to make a point here. This is the way it works, folks. If you guys aren't used to it by now, then here we are. Johnny Groove, what's up, brother man? But I think this point is worth mentioning. We'll get back on track in a second. But here's the thing with social media that people don't understand. Social media incentivizes compliance to the algorithm that dictates the experience of its users. As a content creator, I'm somebody that will become more successful the more effectively I comply with the algorithm of the given platform that I'm producing content on. In my quest to master the algorithm of a social media platform, what is not considered with any priority is the value of my content to the followers of it. So content creators are not incentivized by becoming more valuable to the people they're creating for. On the contrary, they are incentivized because success is to be found by their willingness to comply with how the social media platforms want them to behave. I accepted a long time ago, and maybe it was the first time I realized that I was shadow banned. Maybe it was the first time I was demonetized. Maybe it was the first time I got suspended from a platform. Like, there's a certain point early on in my quest to go outside of my brick and mortar martial arts schools. There's a certain point where I realized it's like, oh yeah, this is never really going to happen here with any degree of legitimacy. You know, there are a lot of people on social media who are very, very successful, but for reasons that I just articulated, I think you make a mistake by automatically associating their success with their value. Masters of the aquarium is a phrase that I first introduced in my content over a decade ago. The aquarium being the artificial environment in which we all, to some extent, live. If you're on YouTube, you're contacting the aquarium, right? And the aquarium, just like a fish aquarium, is an idea of how we could recreate the natural environment of its inhabitants. And in society, you see a lot of decisions that are made from varying levels of control and persuasion and authority on just how we're supposed to live. From city planners to legislators, to the law enforcement component of our society, there are many different agencies and identities that are making decisions on the environment that we're going to live our life in. That aquarium has different strategies that one could apply to get what they want. Again, I think we make a mistake when we conflate those successful formulas with the most valuable formulas that we should, in a universal sense, be looking to engage. I know a lot of people on social media understand the term doom scrolling nowadays. And doom scrolling is basically when the human brain meets a certain type of stimulation. That we are doom scrolling in large numbers is just the output of an input that was designed to generate just that effect. It's not a matter of, oh, you guys got to be better about doom scrolling. Well, that's fine. But I could say, to put that in another way, I could say you need to protect yourself from the liabilities and vulnerabilities of your brain. I said years ago, you can't just tell somebody to stop doing something wrong. Bad habits aren't just removed. They need to be replaced. There needs to be a placeholder for that ritual and habit that were negative or dysfunctional or bad. When you look at what happens in social media today, I know that I will never be a viral identity because there's a certain point where I will not comply. And it's not that I'm trying to, be this sort of combative, just contradictory type of identity. I'm anti-compliance. It's like, no. Every day I wake up and try to focus and center myself to the best of my ability on what my mission is. And I'm not going to deviate from that because of the allure of the rewards in the form of status and trinkets from social media platforms and the aquariums that they are trying to sell. When you understand where you're going, you don't necessarily need to listen to the people who are offering you directions on how to get there. If you are on mission, there's a certain redundancy that gets in the way of compliance. If you're somebody who has sorted out what is valuable to himself, herself, and you've done the work to see how you could make those values manifest in a given approach to your life, once that's sorted out, what's left is just to sort of walk the path that you've mapped out for yourself. In one of my programs, Mission Mastery, I talk about the bumpy road, and this is really a reference to that model, whereby every day is a starting line. If we know where we're going to get feedback that presents itself along the way. But we don't need somebody to deviate or modify our route at the starting line. So all of these people that are so successful in their facade, their mask on social media, but have anything but these successes in the real world, that's a decision that you can make. But just understand that's not an approach to life that I advocate for. I advocate for being valuable at the level of the individual. I advocate for being valuable to the people that you've obligated yourself to be valuable for, to provide or protect, for. I also advocate being valuable so that the alliances that you could create through your regular organic movement through the world tend to be more valuable and more compatible with your mission. If you are a weak, undisciplined, spiteful, emotional loser, you're not going to make a lot of powerful friends. So it has to start with you. So I think I will use that. I don't know how seamless a transition it's going to be, but I will use that final thought to get back into what the outline for today is. Magoo, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. So today, the topic of today's talk is the function of your fuel. The function of your fuel. Everybody talks about motivation. I myself have a process, a structured approach to reclaiming a productive state. A productive state, I think, sometimes is inaccurately reduced to being in a good mood. Because most people think good mood and they associate it with being happy, smiling, whatever. I would say that it is more accurate to say a good state is a focused, light state, light in that it is not carrying and dragging around the weight of those stories that tend to serve as distractions. It is focused in that our bandwidth is, for the most part, dedicated to pursuing our mission. So being in a good state is something that I think everybody needs to have a process to acquire, to achieve. However, many people still appreciate being fueled by the fires that manifest as motivation. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Right? So when we use emotion as fuel, right? And I've spoken about this in different ways, in different contexts over the years, but just starting with a clean slate and just sharing what I think are just logical observations. Emotion as a fuel burns quickly. The thing about running on emotion is that it is a peak that is a value add when compared to the equilibrium that exists prior to that peak. Walking down a road, here is a mountain. Being in an emotionally high state will give you the perspective that a mountain provides. But what is lost in that application is the inevitable valley that follows. There will be balance. And when we run on emotional highs, we pay for those emotional highs with the emotional lows. We pay for the peaks of the mountains with the depths of the valleys. So emotion not only burns fast, but it also comes at a cost that often isn't factored into the decision to act emotionally. I would argue that most people that run on emotion do so at a subconscious level. I'm somebody who grew up with a temper problem. I'm somebody that grew up with an anger problem. I get it. And listen, I'm not, like I don't go to Angers Anonymous classes, but I also am self-aware sufficiently enough to know that I still have buttons that can be pressed. And I modify how I engage my environment and how I process information to best avoid emotional, dysfunctional reactivity to my life. So this is still a process that I engage in on a regular basis. But I understand that sometimes running on emotion, it incentivizes that sort of instant gratification. And the instant gratification often comes at the expense of a long-term plan or a long-term outcome. It's hard to sort of plan for the trajectory of a valuable future when you are feeding every emotional drive that presents itself during the course of your day. So it's hard to stay consistent on anything if you're running on emotion. Another thing about emotion that I think people tend to not consider is emotion is triggered oftentimes by the external world. So when you're somebody who runs on emotion and using emotion to motivate you, and it could be watching Rocky every morning, it could be the guy that needs to listen to crazy music in order to exercise, but it could also be, losing your temper on your boss and telling him to go fuck yourself, and everybody's cheering for you, behind the boss's back while you're getting your shit and leaving because you just got fired. There is an instant gratification that is usually some sort of cathartic value based on what external trigger set you off to become emotional in the first place. So not only do you have the highs and lows, the peaks and valleys, not only does emotion tend to burn quickly, but there is also a vulnerability that we allow, that we accommodate to the whims of the external world. You guys have heard me say before, you don't want to be the guy that cries when it rains. Meaning, if there are components of our ecosystem that we are not under control of, then we cannot allow those different components of our ecosystem to have a seat at the table of our approach to achieving our mission. I remember when I was younger, my father used to bring my brother and I fishing pretty regularly. And we'd go sometimes we'd go, off the shore. Sometimes we'd go on a party boat. But whenever we went fishing, I remember all those years ago, waking up, and if it was raining outside, hoping really, being a 10-year-old, that my pops didn't want to go fishing anymore. Well, it's raining. It's not going to work. But to my father, that meant absolutely nothing. Like, so what? It's going to be doing something outside. But what it's doing outside in terms of the weather has no bearing on what it is we're doing today, in that we're going fishing regardless. And there was the comparison I could, illustrate with that one story between the mission and the circumstances, being motivated by complying with the mission as opposed to being satiated by some sort of emotional decision based on the external environment. Anything but the mission. It's like, let's say that you had to go fishing in order to get food to feed your family, let's just say. Not like that's never happened, in the history of mankind, right? And it's raining and it's going to be uncomfortable and it is not ideal. And you decide, you know what? I don't like sitting in the rain. I don't want to get sick. I don't want this and that. So you decide I'm not going to go. And that's a short-term resolution to a short-term problem. But then everybody's hungry later. And now you're in a predicament of your own doing. And the logical, reflection is never going to be, well, I wish you guys could eat today, but it was raining. And you guys know how I don't like the rain. We won't articulate it that way. We won't be authentic and truthful, with who exactly created this outcome. We'll create a story that rationalizes and validates our decision. But looking from afar, we know it is exactly as I'm describing it. We are making decisions, emotional decisions, based on short-term struggles and friction at the expense of those longer-term outcomes. Oftentimes, our mission is based on a timeline that exceeds our grasp, right? And that is, it's the carrot on the stick, so to speak. Right? If you could touch the carrot that's on the stick, it kind of defeats the purpose of putting a carrot on a fucking stick. So our goals need to be beyond the short term in order to give us a direction to aim the trajectory of our efforts. If we're only satisfying short-term obstacles, we are always going to do it at the expense of staying on the mission of those longer-term goals. So the sustainability of using emotion is usually predictable. It is sustainable insofar that you are never going to build anything past the moment. So you could do that every day. There are plenty of people who function, especially in the aquarium, with emotional formulas, and they'll, and I've had coaching students, guys who have paid me thousands of dollars who have pushed back sometimes on the observations that I was sharing, and a very common one. This has happened, more often than others. This isn't a natural or common occurrence, but when it occurs, one of the common drivers of it is they talk about the business success they've had. Like, look how much money I have. Look at the size of my business. And they deserve all the credit in the world for that. But that sort of area of their life cannot compensate for all the deficiencies that led them to start coaching in the first place. But some people, they don't have a rational relationship with the different variables in their life that they control. They may have some rational components. You look at a professional athlete, and not everyone, but for the most part, you get a professional athlete. He approaches his craft as a professional. He trains, he drills, he strategizes, he keeps his body in shape. He watches tape to study opponents. He makes sure he's recovering properly. But a lot of those same professional athletes are deadbeat fathers, or are blowing their money faster than they can make it, or are, smacking their girlfriend around, or, like all these other just deficiencies that are really imbalances. If you look at the equilibrium or the overall, tally of their lives areas, right? Their lives components. These individuals may have rational formulas in some areas of their lives and completely emotional approaches to others. And, what is the outcome? And I've just mentioned this, the outcome or what we could usually see as an indication of this is that they have an imbalance in their life. They're so successful and so miserable simultaneously. And it seems counterintuitive at first glance. You look at the guy, who's worth, millions of dollars, and he and his wife are getting divorced and are at each other's throats. And, if you're somebody who's on the other side of the economic, scale, you're going, how are these people so fucking angry? They have so much money. Because not having money basically monopolizes, how you paint the obstacles that you think everybody has. But when you look under the surface, you see it's really an imbalance that oftentimes, and this is the purpose of this talk today, that's oftentimes driven by a dysfunctional level of emotional formulas, right? So because we're influenced by external factors being emotional, it's inconsistent and it's unreliable. If you're surrounded by people who are completely in an environment that's completely on mission, you will have successful outcomes. But whether you realize it or not, you are vulnerable and basically solidified or complemented by those external factors. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I did a 9-day fast. And during that fast, or prior to that fast, rather, I did as much research as I could. I didn't want to be unhealthy. I didn't want to create any emergencies. I didn't know. I didn't know what I was getting into. I don't think up until that point in my life, I had even done a 9-hour fast. So 9 days was a big to do. And I did this research. And one of the things that I discovered during the research was that there were these fasting retreats. And in this documentary, I think I watched the first ones that were made on a large scale and even, funded by governments was in Russia. Russians knew that when things were going on with you, you go to one of these retreats and they basically had water available and shit to do. Occupy your mind, a natural environment, water, but no food. It is very easy, I'd imagine, or at least significantly easier to do a fast in one of those environments than you would if you were somebody who had to wake up every day, go to work. I don't run a construction job. I'm not one of these blue collar, on the site at fucking crack of dawn, swinging a hammer or whatever for 10 hours, 8 hours a day. But I still had to be present. I still had to be functional. I still had to be valuable. I still had to be productive. I still have responsibilities. But I'd imagine if I could just have gone to a retreat and just, chilled all day, every day with everybody understanding what I was going through, maybe even sharing the same mission, the ease at which I can comply to my mission is obviously would be more pronounced. Right. And I think, what I'm saying is not complicated, right? This isn't a sophisticated point that I'm making. But I will say when you're emboldened to the point of success by your environment, you are going to be vulnerable to that unless you have some degree of introspection, some way to look at yourself and say, these are vulnerabilities that I could measure by the imbalances that I'm seeing that need to be addressed. And I can't just rationalize the existence of them or accept the existence of them because of the surplus of success that I have in a completely unrelated area of my life, right? So what do we got here? We got some comments. Aaron writes, forget doom scrolling, not always, of course, but in general is often a waste of time. Like, it's great that you're looking at pictures of cute cats and it makes you happy, but there's so many other things you could be doing to actually improve your life, including something like doing housework that's been put off, etc. Right? Absolutely. And usually that's a great tool to use. Not that we're always going to be on the right side of it, but if we could say, and this goes for anything that we're doing, is there something more valuable that I could be doing right now? And that general question that you could ask yourself accounts for and accommodates those times where just disconnecting is the thing you should be doing. Because value is always determined within the context of balance, right? Movement toward mission and balance while you're getting there. So somebody who doesn't accommodate this is somebody who argues against sleeping. Now, I will say, and I've shared this before, and my opinion hasn't changed, I am not a fan of sleeping. That being said, though, I wear a Fitbit to track my sleep every night because I understand how integral it is getting enough sleep to maintaining the balance that I need in order to continue pursuing my missions. So when you have an individual who's doom scrolling, the nature of it implies that not only is it potentially damaging and destructive, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to get into the whole neurotransmitter, dysfunction that results in from social media use, from doom scrolling, let's say. I will say that it also is something you're doing instead of something else. And if you don't have a process to sort of measure and weigh the value of the things that you're doing, it's going to be hard to say that you're doing the best you can, right? I have situations whereby I invest time in certain projects and I feel I'm being very productive. One of my obstacles continues to be, and it's I have structures in my day to keep me on mission despite this. But one of the things that I always find myself being distracted by is I tend to want to create things. When I see commonalities and observations that I'm making, and I'm a big fan of studying humans, in the wild, so to speak, right? Behavior in their day to day. That's the premise of so much what drives my content. But while simultaneously not wanting to be around people, which is my own paradox I got to deal with. But one of the things I have to do is stop creating when there's still things that need to be done with creations that already exist. If I am dysfunctionally over creative, what winds up happening is I confuse my allies because I'm doing too much. I am not fulfilling the end stages and getting to the sustainable stages of some of the projects that are already in motion. You don't want to be the person that has a bunch of things that are 80% done, 90% done. It is worth closing the loop on something before you move on to the next thing. Become a closer in that sense, right? So the thing is, for me, I have to tell myself, and when I map out my day every day, and I have if you guys have the Master the 24-Hour Cycle program, you know that I list out, I gave an example of one of my days on that program of all the different brick sessions that I have. If I don't do that every morning, I will just wind up doing something that is incredibly engaging. I might distill some actual knowledge and value from, but has nothing to do with any of the vehicles of my value that are currently operating, that are currently active. That is me making sure that I hold myself accountable to staying on mission. By the way, when we are drawn to these dysfunctional rituals like doom scrolling and whatnot, there is an emotional foundation in how that works. When we are susceptible or exploited by the vulnerabilities of our mind, that is a testament to just how much influence the primal nature of our mind and its abilities has. We're not robots. We can't program ourselves to consciously think about and focus on the things we want to with absolutely no exposure to the distractions of engaging society. If I tell everybody right now, do not think of a pink motorcycle. Everybody's seeing a pink motorcycle. Some of you guys are thinking of scooters. It's not a fucking motorcycle, right? But the way that the brain works is we could command our conscious mind, but we could only program our subconscious mind. But the subconscious mind is always looking to break through the surface. When we have emotional formulas, we're essentially bypassing our conscious decision-making process and allowing our more primal instincts to take the wheel. And obviously, we're always going to be paying the consequences of that monkey in our brain, controlling our lives, right? Next comment. What do we got here? What the hell is this? Two on Tom, did you just give me $20? Oh, you're the best. All right, Two on Tom writes, and it's like, it's in this, this is it. Here's Two on Tom's $20 $20 comment. He says, this message is very important in our society today. I definitely personally get charged up by these types of conversations and thought patterns. Well, those of you, most of you guys have been following my stuff. You have to know who Two on Tom is. But Two on Tom is part of my very small circle of allies that understand the value of these topics. Tuan Tom has worked with some of the most dangerous men, America has ever produced. There's a reason why somebody like Tuan Tom, who's connected to those circles of men, of warriors, these are the things that they find valuable. I don't know how many tier 1 operators in the military are keeping up with the Kardashians, right? I don't know how many of those guys are tracking if the Yankees clinched the pennant race. I don't even know what that sentence means, but I've heard it said. I just went to a Yankee game the other day. It was terrible. But when you look at guys that actually get shit done at a high level, where the consequence, by the way, is higher than any of us pay or are exposed to on a daily basis, these are the things that they want to talk about. These are the types of conversations they want to have because they understand. And it's funny, this morning, one of the guys in my mastermind group, shout out to my man Oscar in Cali. He's been part of my mastermind group for a little over a year, and he and his business partner, just navigated an obstacle. And he shared this morning that most people, and he added the qualifier. He goes, not people here. People here get it. He goes, but most people outside groups like this don't understand the value of mindset. And he assigned that observation to where his mind went, subconsciously driven, but where it went when he and his business partner hit this hurdle recently. His mind went right to productive formulas and action steps. These are the conversations that more men need to have. I don't think it's a coincidence, and obviously it is a multivariate dilemma, but I don't think it's a coincidence that with the advent and explosion of social media content generation and all the algorithmic discoveries of how to most effectively manipulate the brain, I don't think it's a coincidence that as this is occurring, men are becoming more fragile, more emasculated. They're existing more and more in their minds, the minds that are being programmed. And I don't mean some fucking stupid science, like magical fucking brainwashing shit. I just mean the conditioning that occurs, the Pavlovian classical conditioning that occurs when engaging the algorithms of these social media platforms day in and day out. You will think in a way that they have designed. You could deny it all day long, but that is the truth of it. But again, it's not a coincidence that the most capable men have conversations that are based on how do we strengthen that mind, that same mind that so many people today are just offering and sacrificing, to the social media gods. That same mind, the most serious and capable individuals on the planet are trying to find ways to make it that much more impenetrable, that much more anti-fragile, right? That much more self or intrinsically motivated, right? This is not a coincidence, and I'm somebody who I still have my obstacles. I still have the emergencies that pop up, the accidents that occur, emergencies and accidents. The nature of them is that we don't plan for them, right? That's why I don't wear flip-flops outside, thanks to Tuan Tom. Men, if you're wearing flip-flops outside, you're fucking up. We'll explain that again another time, but I got that from Tuan Tom. The thing is, if you're an individual who understands that, yeah, emergencies are going to happen and accidents are going to happen, it is a matter or a question of integrity, of responsibility, that we train ourselves to prepare for them. There's always going to be a sliding scale of what are the probabilities. Like, I want to be prepared, but I don't want to be paranoid, right? I shared years ago the function zone, where if you're not prepared at all, we say you're unprepared. And then you start to prepare, but you're just barely prepared, right? You're prepared at a low level. Then you increase your preparation. You increase it. Well, there's another line of function where you could be too prepared. What's that called? We call that paranoid. It is when you start sacrificing other components of your mission just to increase the preparation in this one application. I don't ever want to be hit by a car crossing a street. I want to have 100% certainty that I would never be hit by a car crossing the street. So I'm never going to cross the street. Well, it's going to be hard getting hit by a car crossing the street if you don't fucking cross the street. But what are we sacrificing by having this absolute commitment to something that just exists in one little vacuum of awareness in our lives? So the context of being functional can never be ignored. Let me get some other comments here. By the way, if you guys want to make sure your comment shared, give me $20. Oh, it's the first time that happened. Two on Tom, I'll tell you right now, I am impressed that I would not know how to give somebody $20 on a YouTube video. Oh, but I appreciate you, brother. All right. Two on Tom shares. Emotions like hate, jealousy, anger are dirty burns when it comes to energy. This is a great sentence right there. There are cleaner fuels within the emotional energy realm. Absolutely. The foundation, or let me read this before I get into breaking down. Logic is the method we can use to decipher the proper types of fuel to use, or the better type. And I think a good filter or lens to put on top of that is, are we being proactive or reactive? Are we implementing a tool when we see its need, or are we responding with whatever way we have available in the moment, completely disconnecting ourselves from any logical process to apply the proper tool? I made the joke on my mastermind group today that I have a lot of tools, and I literally mean like tools, right? Like good tools. The other day, there was a nail that was loose in the frame over here on the wall, and I hit it with the bottom of my drill. And I thought I was being really fancy because I had a spare piece of wood here. So I was like, all right, so the nail doesn't go into the battery, I'll put a piece of wood there and hit it. Now, here's the thing, not the best tool for the job. One could say that I was acting almost emotionally because I did not want to invest the time to figure out how to more effectively deal with that dilemma. Just an analogous, illustration of this idea. But I think if we don't have a logical process to begin with, and everybody's got a logical process, not everybody, you understand. If we have not trained our logic to show up and arrive at those times when we need it the most, it's never going to play a role in the decisions that we are making every day that alter the very trajectory of our lives. We have to train our ability to do this. I'll give you an example. One of the things that happens when somebody starts training and striking is, they're in front of somebody, and let's say they're just starting to spar, or even you're holding mitts and you're starting to give them some feedback, but they start for the first time seeing punches come at them as they're expected to still produce their techniques. What always happens without fail with somebody who has no experience with this is when that first strike comes, they do two things. Number one, they close their eyes. Number two, they move their head away. Now, there is a very valid and I think logical evolutionary explanation as to why that happens. We want to protect our vision. We want to make sure our face is in one piece, because that's the thing, that we wind up finding somebody, a partner to mate with, this face. Cavemen didn't really have, fancy cars and big gold chains. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we want to look like we can produce healthy kids. Anyway, they move away, they close their eyes, and when you tell them, don't do that, there is absolutely no change in what they're doing. So you could say, why aren't these fucking people listening to me as a coach? Obviously, what may not be obvious to me, having coached as long as I have, it is not that they are ignoring what I'm telling them to do. It's that what they're doing is beyond their conscious control. So we need to invest in a conditioning process to train their subconscious to act and react in a way that is congruent with the outcome we're trying to create. We want them to slip. We want them to catch or parry. We want them to counter. We want to do all these different things. Well, they didn't show up with those instincts. That software wasn't on the computer they showed up with. We have to program it in order to do that. There is a process there. And when it comes to mindset, like how do you not become depressed in an emergency situation, in a tragic situation, in all of these generally negative situations? You don't have a process that keeps you stuck in your head. Think of being depressed as, and I've used this analogy before, as a spiral downward. In order to spiral downward, you have to stay sort of on that slide, that spiral slide. You have to stay on it in order to continue to go down. There's a certain point where the momentum that you gain makes it harder to get off. But if we don't have a process that gets us off that slide as soon as we can, we are going to be vulnerable to the momentum that winds up being created. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, being depressed, let's just stick on that for a second. Like depression has a function. There's depressive states observed in animals. And the best way that I could explain it is there's a point where we have to have a way to recalibrate our expectations. We have to have a way where we stop trying to change the outcome based on the tools that we have when we see it's not working. This depressive state allows us to disengage our sympathetic nervous system or bypass it. It allows us to sort of say, okay, this isn't going to happen now. I guess I'll just have to start over again from this new perspective. It's how we recalibrate those expectations. The problem is, and this is, my father's phrase, that he used on me on more than one occasion. If it was more than one, it was more than 1,000 probably. We're so smart, we're stupid. So we wind up having this psychological gear that has an evolutionary basis, but we take it and we just run with it. It's like when I buy ice cream, I got to buy the pint. Because if I buy like the bigger one, like the half gallon, I'll eat it like a pint, right? So I know my limitations. Well, there's a point where animals don't maintain this depression, even though it could be argued they display depressive states. We need to have an understanding that we're just the way we're designed, we have these vulnerabilities. But when accounted for, we have great capabilities as a result or in addition. So when I look at somebody who's married, a lot of money, nice house, healthy kids, and he's depressed, it's easy to say, what the fuck are you depressed about? And it's even valid. It's a legitimate question. We could even argue you don't have a reason to be depressed. But one of the sort of, the hidden meanings in that is there's never a reason to be depressed, right? So whatever he's depressed about, it's not about his circumstances. Oh, he's depressed. Why is he depressed? Oh, his parents just died. Curious. Has anybody else had both of their parents die and not been depressed before? Well, yeah, everybody's right. So it's not that. It's not the circumstance. So when we're depressed, it's more of a testament to how we deal with the friction and conflict and obstacles in our lives than it is the value of them in some universal sense. Great. I shared this in my mastermind call this morning. Great quote by David Goggins. I'm a big fan of David Goggins. If you don't like David Goggins, something's wrong with your level of expectation. Like, I don't know if I ever want to meet David Goggins, but I really like his energy. He's a guy. This quote, he said, and this is in the context of dealing with haters online. He said, a lot of people hate haters. He goes, I love them because I used to be a weak motherfucker too. And it's fucking great. The idea of it is how you deal with a circumstance is going to give you the outcome. But how you deal with it cannot be ignored when the outcome presents itself that you don't want, whereby you just assign it to the circumstance. So if we don't want to be like, you look at all these people, because there's plenty of guys out there, and if anybody's like, when I work with somebody in one-on-one coaching, I have to manage their energy and I have to make sure that they understand that I'm on their side. With you guys, I have less of an obligation to do that. So let me just say, if you are somebody who agrees with what I'm saying, you're somebody who's saying, you know what, a guy has to have a strong mindset, has to do this, and you look at your life, your schedule of events during the course of a week, and there is no dedicated time to train these things, you're full of shit. You are full of shit. There are so many just dysfunctional anomalies in our society today. Just degenerate, deviant directions in which many of our society have moved in. I would argue that that is a direct result, not completely, but primarily a direct result of the surplus that our modern societies in the first world enjoy. We're not starving the way people used to. We're not in fear for our lives the way people used to. Oh, there's people starving. There's people's crime. Like, I'm not, you know what the fuck I'm saying. Sure, go live 500 years in the past. See how fucking tough you are. When a motherfucker's, walking down the block and there's some dude fucking cooking a rat on a stick. There's just a certain point where it's like, if you don't work on these things, how do you know it's not your environment? That's one of the ways, or one of the perspectives that allows me to be grateful for obstacles, to be grateful for struggles. It's difficult. Fuck, man. Like, shit goes sideways. You want to fucking yell. You want to throw, like, that is a normal reaction, by the way, right? That's a first step reaction. I created a program called Second Step Strategies, right? Because there is a difference between your first step and your second step. We get better on the first step over time, programming ourselves. But second step is what we're really accountable for, because that's when we can recruit our conscious mind to make better decisions. But there's something to be said for, I appreciate these obstacles and these emergencies and these tough points that happen in my life from time to time, because they remind me that I'm being protected by my environment. They remind me that this could all be taken away in a second. Those of you that are healthy, don't take it for granted. Those of you that have healthy children, don't take it for granted. Marriages, businesses, assets, skills, friends. The spectrum is gratitude on one side, entitlement on the other. When we are actively grateful for these things, it never allows us to become completely reliant on our environment, consistently making sure those things are there. I know some people who, they find out their girlfriend's cheating on them and they beat the shit out of her. I know other guys find out their girlfriend's cheating on them. They just break up with their girlfriend, right? It's not that fucking serious. But what is it? What happens in those individuals that lose their ability to remain functional when something changes in their environment? They had never really accounted for how much they relied on that environment to be functional. All right, guys, we're going to call it there. You guys are awesome. Let me see some more comments. All right. Two on Time says the book Algorithms to Live By is worth checking out. Right on. I wanted to share that with you guys. Jamie says, I hear in Africa they regularly find mangled flip-flops and lion shit. Yeah, that's how that works. Does everyone else on this chat not have fingers? Nobody has anything else to post or add? Right on. That's the struggle, Tuan. Phil Hathaway says, mine died 5 months apart. Right on. Not that I'm celebrating that, but I appreciate the share. All right, guys. Man, great talk. I had fun doing it. I appreciate you guys that participated. Those of you guys that are hanging out and watching. I appreciate you guys hanging out as well. I'm here every week. You guys know that. If you are not on the email list, make sure you do that. Links are in the description. Aside from that, I will see you next week. Appreciate you all. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.